everybody for joining us. My name is Amy Blingmore-Patterson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, and welcome to the final session of our 2021 Connecticut Land Conservation Conference. As we've been saying, and as we were chatting a little bit informally during the time that you were all coming in the room, our fingers are crossed that we will be back at Wesleyan in 2022. I also want to acknowledge, as we have been doing throughout every session, that we in Connecticut are on the traditional territory of the Mohegan, the Paugussett, the Wappinger, the Pequot, and other indigenous peoples. We take this time to acknowledge the original caretakers of the land and encourage you to spend some time getting to know their cultures and the history of the lands on which you live, hike, and enjoy. I also want to give a big shout out to our 2021 sponsors, including our lead sponsors, Eversource Energy, Audubon Connecticut, Aquarian Water Company, Connecticut Forest and Park Association, Connecticut River Gateway Commission, Donosky and Associates, Karen and Fazio, Land Trust Alliance, Housatonic Valley Association, and Litchfield Hills Greenprint Collaborative, the Larry London Foundation, Little Green Light and Landscape, the Nature Conservancy, the Trust for Public Land, and at least 17 other organizations. I think a couple have trickled in the last week, including many land trusts who chose to continue to support us as we offer this alternative conference format. Honestly, that has just been incredibly heartening, and it's so greatly appreciated because we know that these alternative conferences don't offer necessarily that same feeling as our in-person. And so the fact that all of you have stuck with us to lend support, it really means a lot, and it makes a difference. So the theme of our 21 conference, Voices from the Field, What is a Land Trust Now?, was born out of the conversations we have had with so many of you, especially throughout the past year and a half. Over the course of the past 2 weeks, we have had a chance to listen and talk with Connecticut Land Trust leaders about the challenges and opportunities they see for land trusts now and in the future. The topics have ranged from sustainability to collaboration, housing to stewardship, land access, and food security. We've explored how land trusts are responding to the climate crisis as part of their conservation planning and community outreach. And we have heard from a dynamic team of young conservation professionals who candidly shared their feelings and insights into the issues that drive and inspire, but also challenge them as they journey down their career paths. Today, we are so honored to welcome 5 extraordinary land trust leaders from across state borders to share their perspectives on what it means to be a land trust now. Before I turn this over to Kevin to go through the introductions and jump into the conversation, we all wanted to get a feel for who is in the room. I saw you coming in and I recognize you in the land trust, but I think for the benefit of our speakers, it would be really nice for them to get to know you very quickly before we launch. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and just click all that's applicable to you. When people say to me, describe the land trust community in Connecticut, I'm like, well, how much time do you have? Because we have over 130 organizations, and as much as you might have in common by way of your mission, you're all very different in a lot of other ways. And I think that's what makes our state unique, and I think that's what gives us a lot of opportunity to do some really terrific things. So with that, Kevin, I'm going to turn this over to you, introduce yourself, and go ahead and set the stage for the roundtable.
Thanks, Amy. And thanks for doing the poll. So interesting. It looks like an even mix of everything, which is, I think, great, which means we'll have a lot of interesting, I think, insights and feedback from folks when we get to the Q&A section. So really glad everyone could join us. And thank you, Amy and CLCC, for hosting this series of timely conversations about the present and future of land trusts in the land conservation movement. I think it's very exciting, and just really thrilled about how you've approached the conference this year and engaging on these really important topics. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Kevin Case. I think I know many of you. I have been based in Connecticut for my whole career, really, and working for quite a long time with Land Trust Alliance alongside Amy as a partner organization and as a board member at CLCC for many years. Since that time, since April of last year, just when the pandemic started, I switched jobs and now I'm president over at Mohonk Preserve, which is an 8,000 acre nature preserve and home of the Gunks rock climbing community here in the Mid-Hudson Valley. And I was really excited when Amy invited me to come back and share some time with the Connecticut Land Trust community, which I'm just so proud to have been a part of for so long, and excited to be a part of this event. So thank you, Amy. So now I've had this opportunity over the last year to wear the Land Trust leader hat. And it's made me really appreciate how it's been thought about setting up this conversation in terms of what's a land trust look like today. You know, I've been around long enough to have seen a lot of evolution in terms of how land trusts have thought about their work and how the pressures of our communities and society are changing how organizations think about how they're allocating their resources, their time, and their focus. And I think we're all recognizing how meaningful our work can be in terms of impacting communities in a really positive way if we're really thoughtful about it. And I think we'll hear a lot about that today, and excited to hear about it. Amy's put together a stellar group of land trust leaders from around the country, really, that are going to provide some great perspectives on where we are and where we're going. And that includes Ebony Alexander from the Black Family Land Trust in North Carolina, Robin Carlton from Lookout Mountain Conservancy in Tennessee, Kristen Deboer from Kestrel Land Trust in Massachusetts, and Jim Bonesteel from Rensselaer Plateau Alliance in New York. A really august group of folks that we have with us. And before we let them introduce themselves, I just want to say, I really think it's important to note that these groups really all are coming from places similar to the land trust community in Connecticut. These aren't the uber large groups with the uber large staff and budgets. These are organizations that really have beginnings much like everyone in Connecticut, and have been evolving really, I think, effectively to meet the changes and needs of community and society. And I'm excited to hear their story. And without any further ado, I'm going to give each of them an opportunity to introduce themselves, talk about their name, their title, their organization, geographically, where they're focused, a bit about their mission, and sort of how they've seen their organization change during the time that they've been with the organization. And to kick it off, each will have about 5 minutes. We'll start with Ebony. So Ebony, off to you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And thank you for inviting me to participate in this panel. Just a little bit about me. My name's Ebony Alexander. I am the executive director of the Black Family Land Trust. Land Trust was founded in 2004 by the North Carolina Black Attorneys Legal Project, and you'll hear it often referred to as LLPP. It was a land loss prevention project which was started by the Black law students at Central College Law School in North Carolina. Our mission, very simply, is to help historically underserved populations retain their land assets. We see land as an asset. It should be a performing asset for current and future generations. And we also see land as something that connects particularly people of color to their history in this country, whether they're indigenous people or formerly enslaved people, ancestors of the enslaved. I actually live on land that's been in our family for a number of years. My great-grandmother was born on this land a slave. She was the daughter of one of the landowners, and we've just been hanging out here for a minute. I came to this work in a very circuitous pattern. I did not start out in conservation or environmental protection. I started out as a public policy person and then in nonprofit management and governance. My love of the land came from my father. I realized very early in life his connection to the land, although he did not grow he left here, and I didn't grow up here. I moved back later in life. The fact that he always had such a keen appreciation for the land and so much respect for it. And he instilled that in my brother and I. I always say he was the person who made me never want to throw any trash out. If you were ever to look in my purse or my briefcase, you'd find all sorts of bits of pieces of paper and all kinds of stuff. Because as kids, if we were with my dad, if you dropped a piece of paper or you threw it out of the window of the car, he would stop and make you go pick up that piece of paper and every other piece of paper, because you didn't deface the land like that. You respected it. So it was something that was instilled in me. It was a lesson I learned, didn't even know I was learning it, and certainly didn't know that later in life I would be doing this kind of work. How has the BFLT changed since I've been here? I've been here since 2009. And we've changed in that we have developed programs. Initially, the BFLT did the more traditional land trust work, looking at easements, educating people on land preservation. I came in and started to look at how do we get the next generation involved, and how do we get them to understand and want to protect their family's land assets. So we created two programs, the beginning of my tenure. One was the African American Land Ethic, which connects African Americans to our rich history here in the Americas, beginning with the Middle Passage and going through today, helping people, particularly the next generation, understand that there is no shame in our history of slavery and of sharecropping, because we didn't invent or put ourselves in that situation. And I always say to the next generation, don't let someone else's crazy separate you from your land assets. To the current generation who owns the land, I'll try to get them to see the land as human. If we can make the land human, if you can see your connection to the land, and you see it as you see one of your children, then you're more likely to want to hold on to that land. So with every family we work with, we help them write their story. How did your family come to get to this land, to own it? What are some of the significant things that have happened? And usually you'll hear things like, this is where my uncle ran and broke his arm, or this is where they used to kill hogs, things like that. So that is what the land ethic does, and it helps people understand and appreciate the land. The other program that we do, since I've been here, is something called Wealth Retention Asset Protection, which is the WRAP program, and it involves us in policy. We were instrumental in getting the Uniform Petition Heirs Property Act passed in Virginia in 2020, and in 2021, some subsequent legislation that informed how municipalities can sell heirs property for delinquent tax sales. So it's how we resolve heirs property. Second strategy is how we make sure that we have an orderly farm transition or estate plan in place. Third strategy is looking at traditional easements and other conservation tools. Fourth strategy is looking at rural financial literacy. People who live in rural America have different costs than people who live in urban America, and we don't realize it. And then finally, the fifth strategy, is beyond 21st century farming. I always hold up our farmer in Orange County, North Carolina, who was a 30-year tobacco farmer, who now raises freshwater prawns on the same land that he raised tobacco, and how he made that transition during the tobacco buyout. So I think that's how we are. The big changes since I've been here, and we're continuing to do more policy work. We are now in the policy arena in a very significant way through some of our partnerships. And you think that we'd have a huge staff. We're a very small organization. We're 5 staff. We have an active board, and we do lots in partnership with other organizations.
Great. Thank you, Ebony.
Thank you.
Big stuff and amazing work you're doing. Really appreciate it. Robin, let's go to you. I've known Robin for it seems like a decade at least, and just always been in awe of her programs and what she's doing in Tennessee, and love to hear more about what's going on.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Robin Carlton, President and CEO of Lookout Mountain Conservancy. Organization started in '91, and it really started just because there was a water slide that went down the mountain, and it was in much need of much repair, and the owners didn't want to repair it, so they were going to sell the 3.5 acres for a used car parts lot. And just so you know, Lookout Mountain is where all the old money is in this region. And one of the women up on the mountain, a very progressive woman, said, that's not happening on my mountain. There's nothing wrong with that type of business. We all need that. However, not on my mountain. So she got her checkbook, she went down, she bought the property, and then came home and told her husband what she had done. She then called a friend and said, hey, you're going to start a nonprofit, and I have the first piece of land that you're going to be able to take care of. And that's really how we got into business when we came about. We've changed names 3 times just for really kind of as we evolved and developed as an organization. I've been here for 12 years, and let me kind of share with you a story that really kind of sets the stage for telling where we were, and then I'll describe where we are today. First day on the job, one of my board members said, come on, I'm going to introduce you to some folks. So we went to the largest foundation here in Chattanooga, and it was not anything like I thought. I thought I was just doing a really short meet and greet. An hour and a half later, I'm leaving his office with a list of 13 things to do before I should come back and ever ask him for a penny. And I'm going, oh my goodness. I knew the organization. They told me that they were in bad shape. I had no idea what bad shape meant. So I then thought, you know what? I've got this list of things. I might as well go to all the foundations that have supported Lookout Mountain Conservancy in the past and just ask them if there's anything else I should add to the list. And so I did. I just put the list in front of them and said, add to it. And several people did. The number one thing on that list was that I had to fire every board member, and I had to rebuild my board because the community saw our board as just a glorified garden club. And quite honestly, they were. They were great, great women who still support us through all this time, but they were not decision makers. You know, they had a real focus, and it was all about gardens. And we're so much more than that. Another thing I ran into as I started my tenure here is that everybody worked in silos. I mean, we have 8 conservation groups here in town. And I mean, they did not play nice. It was cutthroat and incredibly competitive. And one of the things about me is that I'm an identical twin. So from conception, I have been sharing, I have been collaborating, I have been doing all these things that you want in a partnership, right? So it just blew my mind that people were so territorial and weren't really willing to come to the table and just really work with each other. And over the time, I've just chipped away at that. And now we work with everybody, and everybody works with us. It's just, there's just too much to do to think that you have to, you know, carry and develop everything on your own. So we have now become an organization that really is considered one of the go-to organizations. We don't have all the answers. We don't pretend to have all the answers because we're only a staff of 2. But we have great partners. And I tell my interns all the time, I don't have to know how to do things. I just need to know how to find people that can do those things. And so because we have so few staff, we do have our intern program, and they do a lot of heavy lifting on the conservation side of what we do. And, you know, it's amazing to see these young people connect to the land. I have, over time, made it really my mission, my personal mission, to make our board reflect the community in which we work. It is not lip service. We have an equal amount of people of color on our board, and it has become such a rich environment for all of us to learn, all of us. One of the things I was going to say is that our mission, when I first came into the organization, I read the mission statement. I was like, do we do this? And I saw no evidence at all of our mission statement. And then I asked my board, is this what we want to do? And they were like, well, I think we're actually doing other things that are more important and more relevant. So we rewrote our mission statement, and we're about to rewrite it again because we've outgrown it. And so one of the things that, you know, I really love now about my board, about our partners, is that in being able to get things done and to work and really ask sometimes the really hard questions. If you asked a hard question to my original board, they probably would have cried. So now it's just really kind of reflective of how much respect that we have for each other. And my love for the land came, I grew up in the city of Atlanta, but my backyard, we were so privileged because we had woods in our backyard. That's what it was. And I loved it. Every morning at 7 o'clock, after we got done with all the things we were supposed to do that day, according to my mother, she would say the most wonderful words, and that was, go outside and play. And that's how I connected to the land. The land is my respite. It's where I get centered. It's where I get balanced. And it's where I feel just so full. And then connecting people to the land is a huge part of being able to pass that on and to share it. So thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Robin. Your kind of origin story is just amazing. And we did have one question that came in regarding how you managed to fire your board members and keep them as donors. And I don't know if you want to touch on that now, or we could wait till later for that.
I can. You know, in the South, you know, there's a kind of a social ethic code of conduct. And, you know, if you don't understand Southern culture, it might be a little difficult to kind of understand what I'm saying. But, you know, we talk nicely to each other. And as I was just talking to my board about where we needed to go, they really quickly figured out, I have no business sitting on this board. You know, I'm really not the person to take us to those next levels. Mm-hmm. And so as they would come to me and say, I think I need to resign, I would say things like, you know, we're going to miss you and we hope you stay in contact with us. You know, we've got these projects going on that we really would love for you to be a part of, and just keeping them connected. So that's how that worked.
Right. Thanks, Robin. Kristen from Kestrel Land Trust, tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Deboer. I'm the director of Kestrel Land Trust, and we serve the Pioneer Valley of Western Massachusetts. I'm really inspired by Ebony's and Robin's stories. And I think what I have to share is perhaps a little less personal, but I'll share it anyway. I think my journey with Kestrel Land Trust reflects a lot of what the National Land Trust Alliance has been looking at about how to make land trusts more effective, more relevant, more connected. And we've tried to play that out quite a bit in our region. So that's how I got to know Kevin and Robin. And so I think there's just a shout out to LTA for supporting smaller land trusts. And thinking about who's in the room here, the Zoom room with us, I saw there's a lot of volunteer land trusts, a lot of volunteer board members. I actually got started with Kestrel as a volunteer board member in 2000. I was seeking a way to make a difference locally. I had a degree in college in economics and environmental studies before environmental studies was a thing. I came out with this, need to change the world from inside out. And, I was really looking at the big picture of interlocking oppressions of nature and people and how, really our world is screwed up in so many ways, and really came at it from the global ecological crisis perspective. Realized over the course of trying different jobs in 8 years or so since college, it's really hard to change the world all at once. It's not really very practical. And the way to make a difference is to act locally. And I really became enamored with the idea of protecting land because it was so tangible. And when I got connected to Kestrel Land Trust, I saw this at work, a bunch of volunteers working on a very tangible grassroots level to acquire key parcels of land and protect them in the public interest. So that's a process that we all know and love. But I also wanted to think bigger. I wanted to be more proactive. I wanted to connect the relatively small work of our land trust was, protecting about 80 acres a year to the fact that there was this global ecological crisis and we need to get on board. And I just had a sense that this work is too important for just volunteers to be doing it. Like, it needs to be professional, if possible, and proactive, really just to increase the pace of conservation, which is what I was motivated by initially. So, how have things changed in the last 20 years at Kestrel? It's pretty much everything. When I started, I was a volunteer board member. I convinced them to hire me part-time while I was raising my babies. So it was sort of me with a baby on my hip, working from home with a volunteer board, trying to think about how to be more proactive, more professional. Our mission changed over the course of that time, from really just the straight up conservation of land to embracing the need for long-term stewardship, and now connecting people to the land. So our mission has changed from just conserve to so what I see as 3 pillars: conserve, care, and connect. I also see that we're really trying to define our work in terms of urgency, not just to the local sprawl that I think the original founders of Kestrel in 1970, going back to when the group was founded, was really reacting to living in a university town. Amherst, Massachusetts is the home of the flagship campus for University of Massachusetts, and was really a growing town in 1970. And so it was a reactive land trust to the sprawl that they were seeing. But now we have these 3 types of threats, which are much larger, climate change being the biggest one, and the biodiversity crisis, but also this real disconnection from nature that the human population, especially in the United States, is experiencing, and not going out and playing outside, being more stuck on your screens, And so all of those are, bigger existential crises that we are responding to and being aware of. Our focus for why we do our work has changed over time. So we are a generalist land trust in that we protect lots of different kinds of land, farms, forests, parks, and trails. And I would say the reasons that we do that work have become more rooted in what's relevant to a broader range of people and communities that live in this world, in this valley. So farmland conservation is not just, when I came in 2000, it was sort of scenic protection. That's a beautiful farm, let's protect it for the view. Now it's about food security. It's about it's about land access for underserved communities. So last year we finished a project to secure a farm for the food bank of Western Mass. This year we're working with an immigrant group to find Bhutanese immigrants some land so that they have tenure in this valley. For an example, for forest conservation, I think initially our work was about kind of generic wildlife habitat, and now it's really informed by the 30-30 vision, which is this international response to the biodiversity crisis that we need to be protecting 30% of the land mass and waters of the US, along with the rest of the globe, for biodiversity. And forests is also rooted in our work for climate solutions, seeing the trees not just for local wood products or for wildlife habitat, but for carbon sequestration. And we've really tried to position our forest conservation in a way that supports wild forest conservation for mature forests, which have been shown more recently to be the best way to secure carbon, store carbon over time. And then our parks and trails movement work is I think initially about recreation, standard hiking, but now it is more about conservation close to home and whose home, not just the more affluent areas of our valley, but the underserved urban areas that we serve. And not just putting up a trailhead sign to say you're welcome, but to actually partner with groups that get underserved communities out onto the land and really having a sense of active hospitality to bring people in and have a warm invitation to be a part of this movement. So, we're 50 years old, we're looking 50 years ahead, and I'm hoping that we will, continue to think globally, act locally, but also be much more inclusive, much more diverse, and much more relevant to all the communities that live in this place that we all share. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. That was terrific. I've had a wonderful time watching how your organization has evolved over the many years we've known each other. It's just amazing. And so finally, we have, last but definitely not least, Jim Bonesteel from Rensselaer Plateau Alliance here in New York.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm Jim Bonesteel. I'm the executive director of the Rensselaer Plateau Alliance. We started out focusing on conserving the forests of the Rensselaer Plateau, which is in Rensselaer County. It's east of Albany, east of the Hudson River, and the 5th largest contiguous forested area in New York State. I think we're the baby of the group here. We're 12 years old, going on 13. And 12 years ago, we were a group of people that were getting together, realizing that nobody was paying attention to the Rensselaer Plateau. So we incorporated as a not-for-profit land trust, and we were all volunteers for the first 7 years. Now we have 6 staff, 4.5 full-time equivalents, and we're anticipating another staff coming maybe in the fall or early next year. We've conserved over 12,000 acres so far, and there's another 1,000 acres in the queue, and kind of more beyond that. And as I think about how we evolved in the past 10 years, there's really two aspects of RPA that come to mind for me. One is we're learners, and we really reach out and take advice from mentors and experts all along the way. And we're community oriented. I attended a workshop at the New York Land Conservation Conference. It was called the Superpowers of a Small Shop Fundraiser. And her whole take was that there are some things big organizations can't do, but small organizations can do really well. And if you focus on those, they make a big difference. And that made me start thinking about that beyond fundraising. And I realized that we have a superpower in our ability to build local relationships and engage with the local community. Back in 2008, when we were first getting started, I made a call to the Conservation Fund because the Coe Forest Products lands in our area, there were 15,000 acres in our service area were going up for sale. And there were 23,000 acres total. And that phone call started a process. And 10 years later, the Conservation Fund acquired this property. And it will be conserved. It's going to go to New York State. But one of the hurdles was that New York State was going to be using state funds, environmental protection funds, to acquire this land, and the local towns could say no to that, and it could squash the whole deal. And we were in the room talking to the Conservation Fund, and I went out with someone from the Department of Environmental Conservation to talk to the town supervisors the day before the closing was going to happen. And those conversations, I'll back up. Years before that, we invited the towns and the community in to develop a regional conservation plan. And we didn't go and tell them what we wanted to do. We asked them to come in and tell us what was important to them and what they wanted us to do. And after that, we continued to meet with the town officials twice a year. In the beginning, I heard things like, "Oh, I think I know what this is about, and I don't want to have anything to do with it," or I'm a capitalist. We'll see. And some of those same people today it's almost like having another board of directors, because they're in the room and they're saying, let's do this and let's do that. So when we went to talk to those folks, it was a really easy conversation, and they were already kind of on board and expressed their support. So I thought that was something that might be relevant to the smaller land trusts in Connecticut. It's a superpower or the secret sauce, that we were able to bring to the table with this big project done by this, big national group, was the relationships that we had built over the years on the ground. And with that, I'll leave it there, and we'll come back later and talk about some more stuff. So thank you.
Thanks, Jim. And it's interesting listening to all of you. There's clearly some themes I'm hearing around, partnerships, and this isn't new things, but it's just reinforcing, I think, what's been proven to work well is partnerships, good listening and learning, willingness to evolve as the world evolves. You're building programs that meet the moment, and you're not afraid of looking at your missions and evolving those if they need to be, which is sometimes I think groups look at those as sacred texts that can't be touched. So I think that's really interesting. And I think Robin's example that I think us New Englanders could learn a thing or two about Southern sensibility and maybe benefit from that as well. So really great introductions. Thank you all. So we're going to dive into our first question, and we're all working with organizations that are feeling lots of pressures from different places, whether in different issues, whether it's climate or energy development or food issues or diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, Native Americans, housing, recreational pressures. There's a host of things going on. And to start out, we're really interested in hearing from all of you, and whoever wants to start can start, about what you're feeling in terms of internal and external forces that are most impacting your priorities right now. What are those pressures internally and externally that are impacting you and how you think about your priorities and focus? So whoever wants to jump in first, we'd love to hear from you.
Well,
Okay.
oh, go ahead, Ebony.
Go ahead.
So I think for me, our internal pressures are how do we hire people strategically for what we need, looking at a bigger picture, is that constant revision of internal strategic planning. That's a big challenge. Where do we get the money from? Is it going to be a temporary position? Is it going to be a permanent position in our programmatic offering? How do we do that? And that also depends on how where our funding is. So that's an external. So they're kind of the same thing, internal and external. But I think the other challenge that we have as a regional land trust is the pressure of saying no. It is very hard to say no to a family who's about to lose 75 acres that's been in their family for 110 years because the heir whose name is on the tax bill is deceased, and now they don't have enough money to pay the taxes. How do we help them when they say we have a court case on Monday and the day is Friday? How do we say no to that? Or how do we say no to the family who doesn't want to abide by the process for how you resolve heirs property? So much of our work is around heirs property today. So that and our other big challenge, quite frankly, is external, is getting people to trust USDA. I mean, USDA are where many of the programs are that we work with for our landowners, and getting them to be willing to go in the door, to listen, to trust USDA is a huge challenge for us. And it's a heavy burden, because should that relationship implode, then we're the ones that get blamed for it. You were the ones that took us in there. Why'd you do that? So I think those are our big challenges right now. Funding, saying no, and building trust with one of our key partners.
Thanks, Ebony. And you guys can all mute, so you can jump in when you want, but I'm really just to follow up on one of those things and hear from all of you. This issue of saying no, I think, is a perennial issue for groups, and so vital to making sure you maintain focus and not be reactive all the time. And I'm wondering how you guys think about that as an external pressure.
Yeah, Ebony, I could echo exactly what you just said. We're a staff of 2. And so how do you build capacity? And so we've done a strategic plan, and it says we need to build capacity, right? So, then you have to step back and go, okay, well, does your benefits package support, hiring really good staff? And you have to kind of weed through those things, other than just coming up with the funding to be able to hire staff. And where is that stream of income? And where is that commitment? Is it coming from foundations? Is it coming from individual donors? We have just purchased 56 acres that is in the city limits. And we have just put that into a urban voluntary carbon project. And that's a stream of income that we had not even realized this time last year. We hadn't even bought the property this time last year. We wanted it, but we were fundraising for it, but we had no idea that we could turn this property around and have it work for us while it is working for others to offset carbon. So, it's those kinds of things of where does the money come from? We all know we want probably to hire staff. I know I need to, because one of these days I will retire, but I can't until we find the staff. And our strategic plan is pretty aggressive for us, and that is to hire 4 staff in the next year and a half. And so really kind of looking at and talking to the foundations who realize the work that we do and want to support us in the growth. So it's just really kind of understanding, those sensitivities and what people want to help you with, and then responding to that.
I can jump in on the staffing. I think the pressure to grow is really both internal and external pressure. Because there are I see so many opportunities for new funding sources that can only be accessed with professional staff. Any of the federal grant programs really need an incredible focus on administrative attention to detail. There's just a lot of work that you couldn't imagine a volunteer board doing. And because I've been with the organization as a volunteer group, we now have 10 staff, and every new person has made a tremendous difference for our ability to protect more land and to do more quality projects. So not just quantity, but quality projects. So I'm really in favor of staff. It is always a leap of faith with every new staff person. Will this position generate its own momentum to bring in enough money to make it work? Somehow it has for us organically to a certain extent. We're now in a campaign for the first time to raise money looking ahead 5 years rather than just in the moment. But that has really inspired our membership base as well. So I think it's a leap of faith, but it's worth doing. And one thing I like to reflect on with our growth is that we started as a volunteer organization of about 15 volunteers. We now have, and there was a worry that we would lose that connection to the community if we hired staff. A lot of resistance initially around hiring staff. And now we have 10 staff, but we have over 100 trained volunteers and so many more partnerships, and they're so much more connected to different groups around the region. So I think the staffing can lead to a much bigger web of community involvement.
Great, thanks, Kristen. Jim, were you going to add something?
Yeah, sure. I might as well take my turn, right? Yeah, and I totally agree with what Kristen was just saying about the staff just expanding like what you can do, and what we're much more responsive to the community than we ever were able to be before. Balls dropped before, and now we've got interns that instead of coming in and having a so-so experience because people couldn't work with them, we have staff working with them, and they're getting a really rich experience and offering like valuable things to the organization. That's just one example. There's lots of volunteer stuff and lots of programs going on. But the external force that when I was thinking of what I would say today, the external force I was thinking about was climate change and the 30 by 30 vision. And recently, David Allen, I know many of you probably know David Allen. He had a blog post recently where he was talking about, and he credits Judy Anderson with inspiring this blog post and the idea, but there are so many opportunities that are right around the corner because of the 30 by 30 vision and other things that are going on. I know we've got opportunities that are going to be coming in New York State. There's federal opportunities, and what the angle they were coming from is, now is the time to make the leap into greater capacity. So Robin, what you're doing is like right on target. They're coming from figure out a way to add those people, to add that capacity now, make that leap and do it, so that you'll be ready for the opportunities. And I've kind of taken that to heart and begun that conversation with our board. Maybe I'll switch gears a little bit, but we are a member of the Berkshire-Taconic Regional Conservation Partnership. It's a partnership that goes, it's on both sides of the border: New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. Housatonic Valley Association's a member of that RCP, so is Salisbury Association Land Trust. And we've been meeting for some years now and kind of figuring out who we are and doing our own strategic planning as a partnership. But all of a sudden that's come together and we're ready to do some real land conservation. And some of that's been happening already. We just got I can't remember if Amy mentioned this, I think it was in our pre-discussion, but we were just awarded a federal grant from the NRCS RCPP grant that expands that partnership from Berkshire-Taconic. There's three. It's a partnership of partnership: Berkshire-Taconic, Litchfield Hills Greenprint Collaborative, and the Hudson to Housatonic. And it was quite a large award. It's going to be a launching pad for. It could be a launching pad for lots of conservation in the area, and it's certainly going to get us working on real tangible things. So I know our board of directors is really going to be looking at that capacity issue and thinking about how big we want to be, and maybe it's not too much bigger, and how much we want to do and where we're going. And the partnerships, I think, are going to be a big part of being able to respond to the opportunities that come along to do some really big things.
Thanks, Jim. Amy, looks like there's questions coming in that might be relevant and appropriate maybe to connect on now. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of questions here that I'll start to, I did see Kristen's answered a couple of them. Thank you, Kristen, for doing that and being able to multitask like that, which is impressive. So let's see, how are these small land trusts able to add staff? What staff have you added to continue your capacity building? And I think, each of you have touched on that a bit, but if you can dive into that more. And I will say that, staffing up is a big issue for our Connecticut land trusts. How do you do it? Where do you find the money? It's never, the other one is never enough funding.
And just to add to the staffing thing, I think, Jim, you used the phrase, you took the jump, is it sort of a little bit of a leap of faith and, build it and they will come and it'll work? Or
I forget the context in which I said that. I think that that was what David Allen was suggesting. Now is the time to do that. And for us, I don't know if we're lucky in New York State in that the New York State does provide some grants that help the land trust add staff. So we've taken advantage of that. But we are our most recent staff. We're working on a capital campaign. We're still in the quiet phase of capital campaign, and our consultant told us that we should hire another contractor to be the project manager for that. To handle the nuts and bolts of day to day, keep it all going. And I thought, no, I'm not going to spend that money on a contractor. I'm going to hire a full-time person and bring them on and keep them. So by the time we're done with this campaign, presumably we will have increased our fundraising base and our fundraising muscle to continue to keep that person. And I know that that's the case. And so that's it. Just, for me, it's every opportunity I get. The RCPP grant that we wrote built in a full-time position for a project manager coordinator for that partnership. So every single opportunity you get to add staff in one way or another, you take advantage of it and do it.
Yeah, I have a couple notes for that. So our land trust merged with another volunteer land trust in 2011. And at the time we were 2 part-time staff, and we merged and staffed up from that. So that was a big leap of faith and led to a lot of good things. We've also used Terra Firma's, which is the AmeriCorps program for land trust, which is now serving Connecticut, I believe. So that's definitely something to look into. David Graham-Wolf is the director. You can find them on the web. We've had at least 10 Terra Firma service members. They're year-long volunteer positions with a small stipend. And I ended up hiring 3 of them. And they add to our capacity quite a bit and help us retain connections with the grassroots volunteers as well, because that's part of their purpose. Last quick idea that I will credit my husband with this, but early on he said, if you don't value your time, no one else will. And the idea of talking about staff as administrative overhead is one of my pet peeves. Staff are not administrative overhead. Staff are the people doing the work, making the good things happen. And just like we pay attorneys or appraisers or surveyors, we need to pay ourselves. So every budget you do, just put in project management and make that front and center. It's part of our value that we're bringing to the project.
I agree with that, Kristen. One of the things that I always say to nonprofits and my board and other nonprofits is that at 5 o'clock, 95% of your assets walk out the door, and those assets are your staff, and you have to treat them just like you treat any other asset. You protect it, you make sure that it has what it needs to flourish. And it's hard for some people to see, and I just don't understand the funding world's idea that staff are somehow some extra something that you need in a budget. I don't know who they think is going to actually do the work. For us, having staff has been a challenge because we're regional and we're small, and we were working remotely prior to COVID. So having staff that understood being able to work remotely, having staff that understands that I'm not, as the director, going to be standing over your shoulder 24/7 to see how you're getting the job done. I just need you to get it done, has been a challenge for us. And it's always a risk, I think, of hiring staff. I'm always gun shy of hiring new staff. I just have to, my board usually threatens me, get somebody or we're going to do it. But we're in the process of hiring an attorney right now, and I'm not legally trained. I'm not an attorney, and it scares the bejesus out of me because I don't. I've worked with attorneys, all my professional life, but I've never had to hire one and manage one and supervise one, and that is something that is scary, but it absolutely will increase our capacity, particularly in our pro bono legal program with the state of Virginia. So I think for all of us, the challenge is, are you comfortable, and when does the capacity building get to the point where you absolutely have to do it? I think that's when we act.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of chime in on this as well. When I first came to the organization 12 years ago, I promise you, we did not have 2 nickels to rub together. When they told me it was in bad shape, they forgot to tell me there was no money either. And so I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, I didn't even know how a land trust made money. I mean, you're not selling anything, you know, how do you make money? So just really, I was riddled with that. And I would go and just talk to people about, you know, how in the past has this organization, I mean, why are our doors still open? I had no idea, because sometimes paying the rent, I was going to board members to say, hey, you know, we need help. Will you take on the rent? Will you take, I mean, so we were just kind of parceling things together. And over 12 years, we've been able to build up a fairly nice reserve. Now the problem I have is the board doesn't want to they don't want to touch the reserve to be able to build capacity. So now you've got a pot of money over here that's available to do what you need to do. And then, you know, the board's going, I don't know about that. But they are coming around because, like I said, it's me and one other person, and they know that, you know, I'm not going to be there forever. And they've got to start really stepping up. It's not about hiring staff to hire staff. It's really hiring staff to preserve and continue to build the legacy that your organization has really set forth and is in play. And so how do you do that? I mean, there's all kinds of, you just have to be open. I think and you have to be flexible, and you have to, when that door opens, you have to be willing to walk through it. And I've always said, if you're doing the right things are going to happen. It's kind of taking that leap of faith. And that's one of the conversations I have with every one of our foundations, and say to them, if you don't think we're doing the right thing, let us know, clue us in, because there are people out there that have such a bigger picture. They have so much more information than what we have. We only have a snippet of what's going on regionally. And foundation members, donors, people who are running the corporations in your cities and your towns, they have the bigger picture. And just going to have that conversation and saying to them, what do you think about? How do you see us being more relevant? That's building that relationship. And they are now becoming a part of your organization that they want to support.
I just want to just springboard off that by saying I think the biggest fundraising, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Mission achievement is the biggest thing you could do to support your fundraising. It's been true for us. You have those successes, and that's what's going to support it.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jim, I think, you know, that's what I see is that if you look hard at your mission, you truly want to achieve your mission, especially land trusts who have significant obligations associated with their missions around stewarding and defending lands. It takes capacity. And I think, you know, sometimes land trusts maybe don't appreciate what that really takes on top of all the new pressures and initiatives that land trusts are focused on that are so important for community well-being. Amy, I think there's more questions you had queued up.
Yeah, there are some more. I'll pick one or two more, and then you can move on, and then we can grab the rest closer to the end.
Great.
So here's a question that came in. In the Connecticut General Assembly, the protection of open space, outdoor recreation, and access to green spaces have been portrayed by some legislators as quote unquote luxuries that only benefit white people in suburban and rural areas. Any suggestions from the panel on how we can turn this perception around to promote the protection of green spaces as a benefit for all?
I would love to start this conversation. One of my biggest pet peeves something that gets under my skin faster than anything is to walk into a room of white people, mostly middle class, upper class, mostly professionals and government folks. And we're sitting around a table to talk about what we are about to do to different communities. And meaning that this is a trail system, it's a river walk. And every time the river walk is built, a section of it, we move people out of their neighborhoods. And so we are now really we're backing up against a really underserved, it's the poorest of the poor in Chattanooga. And they're asking me what I think about this plan. And so my thought is, why are you asking me? Go ask the people that you're about to affect. Go into those communities and have those conversations. And if you don't know those people, I will introduce you to those people. Because that is it's a hard thing for people for us to get past ourselves, to think that we have all the answers. And I really hope I'm not offending anybody, but this is just one thing that, especially here in the South and working in our urban communities, if we don't go have those conversations and get them to trust us, then all we're doing is just continuing to move people out, and they're not getting connected to the land. And so it's been great because we have been able to do that. We've had community meetings. I have taken some of the city folks that are in charge of those plans, and I just said, ask them what they want to see. If you're making a connection, what do they want to see? And so it's been just this transformation of how people have been able to connect to the land. And we have school groups come out. Where we sit right now with one of our projects, we have 3 very underserved schools that we are working with, and all of them come out to the property. And it's not just a one and done. We make sure that they understand that it is a park for the people, that's been built by the people, and it is that's where they belong as well. They have connection. So I'll get off my soapbox. Sorry, that was something that really, really, really gets up under my skin.
Yeah, so I think it's really helpful, Robin. And I think this is really about, what, in the way I heard the question is, how are green spaces, open space relevant for all parts of communities where we work, and how do you guys address that?
So for me, I think there's, starting with messaging, there's just the true assertion, the facts that forests are not just about recreation. It's about clean air, it's water, it's climate change. And so there's universal benefits that people need to connect the dots and see why that matters. So the relevance of that, farms, it's not just about the pretty view, it's about actual food and access. So that's one start. But I think the harder work is doing projects in areas that are within walking distance to underserved communities, so that there is a tangible demonstrated benefit to all types of people from all walks of life. And so for us, we have one big mountain range, Mount Tom, it's called. It straddles 2 urban communities. But even that is a little bit distant. So we are now doing an urban forest project in the heart of the city. So I think really looking at the geographic location of where we're investing our conservation dollars makes a difference, and then doing the hard work to put the communities in touch with that land and not just protect it and walk away.
That's cool.
It's not an issue that we face because we work primarily in rural spaces, and because our work is concentrating on making sure that that land asset remains under the control of that family as their performing asset. So we're just starting to work in some more urban areas, particularly in the city of Richmond. But I think that if you're starting to look at when you make open space, when you use open space, particularly in urban areas and communities of color, which have been impacted by redlining and other tools, it's, as Robin said, it's critically important that you speak with the community. It's those kinds of actions that create somewhat of this rub between the conservation environmental community and other communities, limited resource communities, because to them, I worked in the affordable housing sector prior to coming here. And one of the things that I used to hear a lot is about the conservation and environmental community. They're more concerned about open space and in North Carolina, the culcated red woodpecker, than they are about whether or not kids have clean air or they have safe, affordable, clean housing. So it puts this division it's really something that if you sit down and talk, you can work out, but you've got to be willing to sit down, talk, and listen and compromise on both sides.
Yeah. Well, I think, thank you, Ebony. It's really helpful. I'm noticing the time, and there's one other question I really want you guys to give your thoughts on and pull your crystal balls out. And if you could each just take a few minutes before we get to the final sort of Q&A session, and just share with everyone your thinking about what does success for land trusts, your land trust, look like in 20 years? What are you going to look like, and how are you going to measure that? Jim, jump in.
Yeah, I might as well go first. So I think, community conservation is where it's at, right? So finding ways that your mission and conservation can work to serve the community as a whole, and help solve some social problems or work with the community in ways that you're not just, it's not just the land for recreation. We were really lucky. We had 2 finalists for a position we hired a few years ago, and we hired one because he had the kind of what we needed to complement what we already had. But there was another person that applied there, and we loved her so much that we felt like we had to hire her too. So we hired her part-time, and she came on, Molly, and she has a social work background, and she is just focused on that community conservation and connecting with community. And she's connected with the Alzheimer's Association. She's getting caregivers and patients out on the land to work with them. And she's doing mindful walks, and she's doing all I can't think of all the different ways she's doing that. But what occurs to me is that we were really lucky to get Molly, and I want to keep her as I want to keep all of my staff. But a land trust could probably do that deliberately. Look for a person with that kind of background and orientation, and do that thing. Hire someone that's just focused on reaching out to these, finding ways that we can solve other problems with the land conservation. So that's it. 20 years, that's what we're all going to be doing.
Well, I agree, and I think there's another element that I would like to make sure the land trust movement doesn't lose. So we have embraced the ideas of community conservation, but we've done so as an expansion, not a replacement of the landscape scale conservation work that also needs to be done desperately from the point of view of, where I started, which is we need to act locally and think globally. Our region does make a difference to the planetary ecological crisis. So I think our success needs to be judged not only by the diversity and number of people that embrace conservation and how conservation is relevant to their lives and solving problems that people have, from health to economic disparity and affordable housing. That's something we're looking at too, how those conversations can happen. But if we lose sight of our mission to protect land for biodiversity, I feel like that would be a failure on our land trust part. So I want to make sure we do both, and we have to get bigger in order to do both well.
I wasn't suggesting replacing land.
I know you weren't, but I think sometimes there's it's so powerful and it's such a big need that it's possible, because it takes so much more time to do quality community conservation work, that you could end up having it completely about that. And so I think if we're looking at 20 years, if we can try and measure our own success by both what the land and the wildlife need, as well as the people, that's the sweet spot if we can find it. No small challenge.
Yeah, exactly, Kristen, and I agree. I guess what I can say is what we're doing today. I am hoping that we over 20 years will get much better at what we're doing today. We really are trying to reach out to our community and really help them through land figure out and try to help them be able to take care of some of the needs. And one of the things that really comes up a lot is the affordable housing, and we are looking at that. We have plans to build 24 homes that are going to be workforce affordable. It's a huge issue here in Chattanooga, and it's within the park that we're building. And the idea is that in Chattanooga, it's called the missing middle, and we want to be a part of that. If we've got this particular property, it falls within our mission because this particular area is so incredibly rich with the history. And this used to be the first neighborhood of Chattanooga. So why not bring back a very small footprint? And I hope that we, in the next 20 years, just get better at responding and get better at really understanding our mission and how it doesn't have to be a mission that holds you back, but it's a mission that propels you and really helps you explore all the things that we can't say no to, right? So just being able to really take advantage of all those situations. And I hope this organization will continue to walk through doors as they're open and just continue to explore and really push the boundaries of what land conservation, land protection is all about, pushing those limits. And that's what I see us doing.
Thanks, Robin. Ebony, what do you?
So I think I jotted down some things. For me, I'd like us to be able to, in our work, is have all of our clients have wills and estate plans so that we can stop creating heirs property, because that's one of the leading causes of land loss in our community. I'd like our community to be fully involved with their own community-based understanding of carbon and carbon capture, sequestration, and how that impacts them, and how do we use carbon as a community asset to help build and enrich their communities. I think that's critically important. And then I think from an organizational perspective, I would like us to have evolved to be fully staffed, whatever that means and what it looks like in 20 years. I don't know. There's a cartoon with people of the Jetsons. If you remember the Jetsons cartoon, then, people were doing online medicine and talking to watches and all of that. I don't know what 20 years is going to look like in terms of technology, but I would like, particularly in our rural communities where I work most, our rural communities to have that access to technology, and not just have access to 20-year-old technology, but have access to the current technology that's affordable. And my final dream for 20 years from now is that USDA will fully embrace limited resource or historically underserved populations and work with them. Because if we don't save our small acreage farms and woodland, we're going to have a bigger crisis with climate than I think we all realize. We're losing them every day, not to larger farms, but to low density development. And we've got to be able to save those small acreage farms. With land trusts, is it more important that we save 1 acre, 1,000 acre farm, or is it more important that we save 10 acre farms, or 10, so that we collectively save more land for individuals that will then impact the larger goal. So that's where I'd like to be in 20 years. And finally, I don't want to be the director in 20 years. I want to be someplace else.
Amen.
Either.
Great. Thanks to all of you. Really great responses, and I think spot on to what we're all seeing coming forward. And with the last few minutes left, Amy, I don't know if you have more questions at this point.
Well, I guess first of all, thank you for that final response there, Ebony. You can't see me, but I'm laughing and crying all at the same time in response to that one. So, Kevin, before we wrap up, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that question. Where do you see what success for Land Trust look like in 20 years to you?
Yeah, for me right now, I'm really focused on just the question of what does it really mean to be a community institution and play a role in helping the community be as strong and vital as it can be. And for the organization I'm with now, it's a different way to think about things. And, I want to get to the point in 20 years where that's just embedded in our DNA. It's just like we're a community institution, and, we're working for the betterment of all the communities we work with, not just focused on, what's the next land project that we can complete that helps sort of fill out our open space map. And coupled with that, I'm really hoping there's other things that are just embedded in our DNA too. And that includes, all the concepts and the learnings that we're all experiencing around diversity, equity, inclusion. So that's not a separate thing, but it's just how we do business. And it's just the way things are done and should be done. And I do also hope, and I was really pleased, Amy, that you started with the land acknowledgement, that, we've really come to a place where we've really integrated the Native American tribes that, we're all beginning to build relationships with, and they're really at the table, with us as whole partners in how we do our work going forward. So those are some of the bigger things I'm thinking about that I hope we can move towards.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for that. And thank you all so much. We just have a few minutes left. And, I want to build off of one of the questions that was posed by my friend and colleague, Eric Hammerling, about this concept of land being perceived and land conservation being perceived. And we felt this acutely during this legislative session as just this luxury and not the necessity. And I think, Kristen, you really touched on it too, about, really focusing in on what the holistic benefits are to communities when we're talking about land conservation and integrating that. And I think for me, you know, in the next 20 years, I really do hope that all people see the value in land conservation and look at it as really something that is just critically important to healthy communities in a holistic way. And we lose this perception of it being something else and something a little bit more, you know, in a luxury way or elitist in a way. And so I'm glad that question was asked. And I think all of your responses really drive home that point about how essential the work that you're all doing and those of you that joined us today are doing for your communities, and how building those connections and making that case in a way that's not telling people, but having them feel it is the most important thing that we can all be striving to do. So with that, and in the last just few minutes, I want to just have a little fun with a word cloud and ask all of our participants here today, not only our panelists, but all of you out there. And we asked the same question the first day, and my guess is we won't see many differences in responses based upon the conversation today. But again, having heard from each other in just one word, how are you feeling about the future of your land trust and land conservation in general? So one word, just throw it out there, and we'll play with a word cloud. And take your time, put that in your chat there. But why don't we hear from? I'm going to look at Kevin. I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to run through all of our panelists. Kevin.
Oh, you want me to verbally state it, not?
Yeah, you go ahead. You verbally state it while everybody else is putting it in the chat.
Oh, I need 2 words. I'm feeling challenged and inspired.
Nice. Okay. Ebony.
Hopeful.
Yes, like that. Robin.
I'm going to say phenomenal.
Awesome. And you can add awesome in that I just said in response. Kristen.
Optimistic.
Great. Jim.
So much to choose from. I'll say excited.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Rebecca's putting that together and giving folks a chance to add their response into the chat. I just want to thank you all again for joining us today, and also for those of you that have hung in there with us for the last 2 weeks. Again, this is not our traditional conference format. We're usually one and done, and then having a nice celebration afterwards with some local breweries. So this is a little bit different, and we are really, really pleased that you decided to join us for this. And I want to most particularly thank all of our panelists, Kevin, Ebony, Robin, Kristen, Jim, for joining us here today, and your staff who has been helpful in getting all of this put together. I know that I'm inspired, and I'm truly grateful for all of your time today. And for those of you that might have missed some previous sessions, we have recorded all of them, and we will have those available to you hopefully within a week or so. So everybody, it is now 1:30. Please stay in touch. Watch for announcements about upcoming events and programs. Tomorrow we're going to be announcing our 2021 Excellence in Conservation Award winners, which we're really excited to do. And most of all, just stay healthy and enjoy the summer, and love your CT Land Trust. So thanks everybody. And for our panelists, just hang in there with us for a little bit so we can get a snapshot. Thanks everybody. Have a great day. Get out there, enjoy it. It's beautiful.